Jessica Lee Hamlin is the Executive Director of Shumla Archaeological Research and Education Center, a nonprofit working to preserve the ancient murals of the lower Pecos Canyonlands in Texas. She earned her BA in archaeology from Texas A&M, where she contributed to the founding of Shumla in 1998. After graduation, Jessica worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington and the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center in Cortez, Colorado. She got her MA in human geography from the University of Texas at Austin, then entered the corporate world with Willis Towers Watson for 8 years, rising to the rank of senior consultant in communications. In 2015, Jessica came back to Shumla as executive director, and in the past 10 years, she's ushered the organization to the achievement of National Historic Landmark designation for the Lower Pecos Canyonlands Archaeological Region, funded and overseen by the 4-year Alexandra project that documented 235 rock art sites, and the recent Hearthstone project that is revealing the age and meaning of the ancient murals. So will you welcome Jessica Hamlin?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I know that this is unusual. I have heard from a lot of different people that Caseta is primarily collectors and that it is hard to collect something that is stuck to the wall. I completely understand this. But yes, knowing about Texas art from all different ages can absolutely inform, just like you said, all of our knowledge about the art of Texas and the artists of Texas and their influences. So I am thrilled to be here. All right, so today I want to share with you something that I think, actually let me ask you first. Is anyone already familiar with the rock art of the Lower Pecos? Oh, fantastic. Has anyone been to a rock art site? Oh, okay. This is yeah, well, okay, thanks for having me. No, that's fantastic. Is anyone completely new to, okay, good. Quite as many people, yes. Well, it's a really exciting thing that we are learning about these murals. It's surprising, and I think it might begin to reframe your understanding of early Texas art. If you have what we call rock art eyes, so we're gonna have to develop our rock art eyes, and this is the way that you kind of look for the red pigments, particularly the black pigments. They used red, black, yellow, and white, but the yellow and white are harder to see. But if you can look here, you can see a panther painted right here. And I'm gonna go back because the same panther is right here. And we're gonna talk about these murals. So Texas history is a lot older than we were led to believe in Texas history class. So much older, in fact, that you may not in the back be able to see the numbers on the timeline. Our Texas history classes tell us about a sliver of the true history of Texas. As epic as those stories are, as incredible as those people were, I can promise you that the other 15,000 plus years had equally epic stories of life and love and heroism and valor and fear and betrayal, and all of these things that we are not privy to normally because they don't record in an archaeological record. What people thought, how people felt, what drove them, what motivated them, it's not part of that stone tool that you find in the archaeological site. And this is the magic of where we are in the Lower Pecos. In Texas, we have one of the best preserved and oldest written records of ancient people in the entire world. Yes, indeed. There's that panther again, right? And you can see other rock art all around it. Now, I promise I'm going to show some really beautiful pictures of the actual art. But these images are those epic stories. These are those stories of creation and cosmology and cosmological events that really framed the lives and the the day-to-day understanding of the cosmos and the sun and the moon and the animals and the plants and migrations and various peoples for thousands of years before, the first arrival of Europeans on our soil. And we at Shumla are preserving these books, what we call books, and I'm going to explain that in a second, through documentation, research, stewardship, and education. So this is where the Lower Pecos Canyonlands is. It is in the region, of course, the Pecos River starts up in Colorado, and it comes down where it meets the Rio Grande is why it's called the lower. It's the lowest part of the Pecos before it stops existing and meets the Rio Grande River. It also has the Devil's River and the Rio Grande River. So this place was an arid but well-watered, lots of tributaries, lots of movement of animals and plants, and multiple ecozones. There's mountains to the south. Of course, the Rio Grande wasn't a boundary in any way in that time. It was a superhighway, if anything. And so it was a prime location for indigenous peoples to gather, just like people do, right? We gather, we do things that we care about together. And in this time, when hunter-gatherer peoples were in generally bands of around 30, moving around on a landscape, following resources, they would then come together in much larger groups for intermarrying, for sharing ritual, and those are the times when they would be creating this art. This started, from what we know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a second, around 6,000 years ago. Now, as I showed you at the beginning, people had been in this region since the Pleistocene. So we have evidence of 15,000, and I'm sure we will probably find earlier evidence of humans in this region. The oldest radiocarbon date we have for the rock art, though, is about 6,000 years. And some of the things that we're trying to find out was that a moment in the culture's history when something changed and verbal expression of these belief systems, poetry, song, dance, painting bodies, painting things that would go away or could, disintegrate, wasn't enough. And it needed then to be, these belief systems needed to be posted on something that was permanent. Was there a shift that led to that? Or is it preservation bias? These rock shelters are limestone, and they are created by spalling and by water movement. And is 6,000 years the longest the back of a rock shelter can survive? So these are questions that we're still working to answer. We have over 400 rock art sites, particularly Pecos River style, but we also have 4 other styles: historic, red monochrome, red linear, and bold line geometric in this region. This is a dot map of about 100 of them, and it's only the sites on the north side of the border because we still have not been able to document in Mexico, though that is absolutely a hope and an effort that we plan to accomplish, because if we believe these are books, as we do, and I'll share why, then the library is not complete until we have it all documented. Some of the sites are relatively small, like this site this is called Red Elk Site. It was, you'll find there's a lot of misnomers in terms of the titles of sites or the names of sites. There were no elk at that time in this place, so it is a deer, but you can see it is painted here with the antlers up. And it is painted over a deep sinkhole that would have been a burial place and a very, very sacred place. My team is also going to go there Tuesday, to set up to prepare for the summer solstice. Because during the solstice, I won't walk away from the microphone, but when the sun rises, it rises in the shelter, and we believe will align with the back of the deer. We have the line perfectly photographed, and it looks like it will be a perfect notch of the deer's face and back, and we believe that it was a summer solstice alignment. There are many, many alignments, but this will be our first opportunity to actually videotape the sun rising and see if our hunch is correct. So I think that Bonnie sent around my sign-up sheet for our e-newsletter. I write an e-newsletter every month. We don't spam, it's just from me. And we'll share whether or not our hunch was correct and a picture of that. Some sites are absolutely monumental, so enormous that we can't even barely capture them in a single photograph. This is a rendering of what you see on this wall. So can you see this panther here is here? And do you see this figure with the U-shaped head is here? And then if we go all the way across to about right here is this figure here. So what you are seeing is only half of the actual mural. Now I'm going to zoom in to this figure here, right here. It is 5 feet tall. And I know it's hard in this light to see the yellows and the whites, but can you see how incredibly intricate every single line is? This is a tiny, tiny portion of the larger 150-foot wide mural. Every little line is perfect. On a background, I mean, this is no canvas like we're used to. This is rock wall, and everything is so perfect. Okay, why do I keep telling you these are books? How do we know, really? One of the ways that we know is through the use of this. Carolyn is holding it here at Panther Cave that I just showed you at. It is called a dynalite microscope. It was invented for dermatologists. When you have something you want to see under a microscope, but you can't take it off and put it, like maybe somebody's skin, or like rock art. We can take images of where the paint layers align. So any place where the brushstroke went one direction and then another went in another direction. And with this, we can create basically a map of the way that the mural was painted. And we can see through determinations what colors are painted on top of what other colors. And in every single case, 99% of the times that we've studied this, and we've been doing it for 10 years, it is always all the black paint first, then all the red paint, then all the yellow, and then all the white. I mean, that is the hardest way to paint something, but it is extremely important in ritual, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So, for example, at this site, this is called White Shaman Site. It is named after this central figure, which is actually a female moon deity. But at the time, it looked like a white shaman, and that's how it got its name. I'm going to focus in on actually the most important figure in this mural, which is the smallest, and show you how it was painted. Okay, we have this crenellated arch that comes down in yellow with black dots inside. We have a figure whose legs are clearly painted within. It is holding an atlatl that is loaded with a spear. On the other hand, it has a staff and extra spears and what we call a power bundle. And then it has antlers, a center style, and then we have this curved line over it. So if we look at how it was painted, this is how it started. Now, if you were putting black dots at the end of red antlers in a painting, wouldn't you draw the red antlers first and then put the dots? But no, that was not how they did it. Then the red, then a different lighter red, then the yellow, and then the white. So as you can see, this means that each figure is actually painted within the others, which allows us to see how the entire mural was painted, from the first brushstroke to the last. So in this mural, and I know this will be a little difficult to see, but I'm going to erase the art, and then I'm going to repaint it for you in its sequence. It's like a constellation of black dots to begin. It's pretty incredible. And it proves that it was a composition. It was always our feeling that these seemed compositional. There were elements, if you look at them through an artist's eye and not an archaeologist's eye, to be fair, I can talk about my own kind. These elements were there, these things that tied the pieces together. But for archaeologists, it seemed like they were probably random and probably indecipherable. The people who had painted them were long dead, was the way that this was interpreted to begin with. And it's one of the reasons why they were not documented earlier. And and I'll get to this in a second, actually. But you can see that is a strong suggestion that these are books. They're also highly patterned. Across the landscape, 8,000 square miles, we find the same figures and different aspects of those figures throughout the Lower Pecos. So we get to the point where when we have, with our rock art eyes, we say, oh, I see a power bundle. That's usually held in the left hand. So if we follow the staff, we'll probably find a figure, And if we don't find a figure, we don't put it there. but you start to find the patterns. So for example, this figure behind Diana, do you see the head here? There's a mask, a black mask. Here in the center of the body is also black. There's panther-style ears, antler tines with black dots, hands that are coming from the shoulders, and stub wings and larger wings, and a single pole ladders here. I'm going to show you a lot easier to see on this one. So you see the hands. So normally, Lower Pecos River style particularly, anthropomorphs are depicted with their arms outstretched. But when they have wings, their hands have to go somewhere. So they have their hands coming from their shoulders in these cases. And large wings, stub wings. If we go to a completely different site, and this is a de-stretch filter to pull out colors that are harder to see with the naked eye, you can see the same elements, the mask, the panther's ears, the antlers, the stub wings. In this case, there aren't the larger wings, and in this case, the mask is white rather than black, and the center style is white rather than black. But generally speaking, it's a very similar depiction, and it looks like it's from a different artist's hand. It doesn't look quite the same, but you can see the pattern. A completely different site 30 miles away. We see, again, the mask, this time black, like the original that I showed you, which wasn't necessarily the original, but you see what original on this slideshow. Panther's ears, the antlers, the hands from the shoulders, the stub wings, and the single pole ladder image all around. And even here, we went to this site, and we could tell that there was paint there, but we couldn't tell what it was. So we went through our whole documentation process. We took it back to the lab, and we're like, oh, it's our Fran. It's this one we know, with the panther ears and the antlers and the stub wings and the hands. So we see these patterns over and over and over again across the landscape. These patterns and these attributes were how these murals were read in the past, and this is why we can start to learn about them and decipher them in the present. And I know sometimes it's hard to imagine, but we literally do this every day. Who is that? How do you know? I mean, yeah, all the things, right? You know exactly who this is. You know what she's called. You know where she's going. You know what she's carrying. You know why there's a wolf in the picture. You know that the wolf is going to go to her grandmother's house. You know that the wolf is going to eat her grandmother, then put her grandmother's clothes on, get in her bed, and when this little girl shows up, they're going to have a conversation, and you can hear it in your head. My, what big eyes you have. You know all of that from this single image. And if I had shown you an image of a wolf in a granny outfit in a bed, and there had been no Red Riding Hood or little girl, you would still know you were in that story, right? So these attributes, these patterns, that one where the center style was black, or the one where it was white, that had meaning. That was a part of the story that they would understand and know what was happening, what part of the story they were in. So this is Red Riding Hood too, right? No. I mean, she's got the Red Riding Hood, but no. Because now she's a little blonde girl with a little blonde boy in front of a house that looks like it's made of candy. And because of our background and having learned the stories that we were taught, we can decipher that instantaneously, not the same story. Now, I am not at all comparing, European fairy tales to indigenous belief systems, but I wanted to depict for you how fast that happens and how instantly you knew everything about that story and you didn't even really feel it or recognize it. That's how these sites were and felt to the people who painted them. And it is also still how they are to the people who still hold those belief systems, who still know the myths or practice them. These sites were painted by people who spoke a Ute-Aztecan language. So this is similar to Ute, Hopi, Comanche, Shoshone, Tarahumara, many groups that have moved across the landscape and speak this kind of language. The sites have particular connection to the myths, particularly creation myths of the Aztec, the ancient Nahua and present-day Aztec, and the ancient and present-day Huichol. And what is truly incredible is that they can still read the murals, just like you read that image. Carolyn and her husband, our founder Carolyn Boyd, and her husband Phil Daring went to a community in San Andres Cojamiata in Mexico, and up in the mountains. The people there came from the northern Mexico area and claimed ascendancy from that area. When the Spanish came in, running from being enslaved and from disease, they went up into the mountains, Sierra Madres, and became extremely isolated in that place, and because of that isolation, maintained their culture and their belief system. And when she showed them the images and the renderings, they immediately knew what they were looking at and started pointing and speaking in Huichol as if, and were completely shocked. They asked her, "How do you have these? Did you dream them?" And she explained they're painted in the north, in the rock shelters and caves of the north. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, absolutely, that's where they should be." And they were thrilled that she had them, that she was trying to understand them, and that she was asking for their input. This is Tomasilla Estrella and Tomasita. And when Tomasita saw the image that I was showing you, with the deer and the figure with the wings and the antlers and the panther's ears, she said, "They look like our ancestors, our gods. This was before the sun was born. The dots are stars. This is Kayumari, and these are the offerings to help the sunrise. And this line goes to Virikuta." Oh, well, good. Okay, I guess we're all set then. Now, I'm making this sound a lot easier than it was. They still speak Huichol, and Huichol had to be translated to Spanish and Spanish to English. And so when Carolyn was there, she would unfurl something, and they'd be like, and then she'd get the Spanish, "They're jumping," I know she said more than that. So they recorded the whole thing, and we're having it all translated. And fortunately, we've asked their permission. May we know these things? May we be doing this work? And what is the right way to do this work in? And they are very excited about the work that we're doing, and we're working directly now with one of their maraakame, which is the word they use for shaman, what we would call a shaman, named Matsua. And Matsua is helping to do these interpretations with Carolyn now. This is Maraakame Raphael, and in this same figure, he said, "This is when the sun was born, and this is the path of the sun, for it is ancient." So I told you these were the oldest narratives, or the oldest books that we know of in the North American continent. And knowing that they can read it, that seems like it can't be that old, right? Well, we do at Shumla, we do radiocarbon dating. And who here is familiar with the way radiocarbon dating works in general? You kind of, if you're an archaeologist, for example, and you have a big old charcoal hearth that you're excavating, and you pull a piece of charcoal out, they can combust it, they can burn it, and get the carbon atoms out of it, the carbon 12, 13, and 14, and they degrade at different rates that are measurable. So if you can count them against each other, then you can figure out how old that piece of charcoal was. And really what it is the day that tree was cut that was then used in the fire. Well, you can imagine that if you were trying to take this much of anything from a rock art site, you would basically just remove the entire panel to try to radiocarbon date it. So because we know they used animal fat as binders, so we can radiocarbon date the day that animal was killed to then have the fat harvested and used in the paint. But you can't take enough to truly combust it properly. Karen and her mentor, this is my science director, Karen Steelman, here she's taking a sample, created a process called plasma oxidation. And this is where we can take a fingernail sliver of paint from the wall that is already spalling off, so it will already be lost, and we can put it into these little chambers, and the combustion process that is now done with plasma, like a neon light, rather than flame. And the carbon atoms are released through that process, and they go down into a liquid nitrogen chamber where they're frozen and sent off to the lab, where the machine that counts the carbon is about the size of this room, so Shumla cannot afford one. We need help with that part, and then come back with the dates. We don't just date the paint, we also date the oxalate that grew on the wall before the paint was put down, and the oxalate that grew on top of the paint after the paint was done. So here the green is the oxalate that grew on the wall, the black is the black paint layer, and the yellow is what grew on the black paint. Then, when we radiocarbon date those, we can have not only the date of the paint layer, but also the date of the upper and lower accretion. And so if, for example, a lower accretion is way over here, then we know something's gone wrong, there's been a contamination of some kind, and we would throw those dates out. We also can take, since I told you that we know that the murals were painted within one another, and we can tell how they were painted, we can specifically take samples from places all over the mural and date an entire mural at one time. As long as when the dates come back, those dates line up, then we can, and then the accretions all line up, we can feel really confident in our dates. So for example, at this site called Jackrabbit Shelter, and it's real hard to see the art here, but there is a really cool looking long red fish here with teeth. It's called Jackrabbit for a totally different reason. I think I have the picture later. I think I kicked it out of this presentation, but I'll show you later because we found something really cool in it. But here you can see we took, how many did we take? Is this 5? Yeah, 5 paint samples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have the accretions as well, and everything lines up perfectly. Those paint layers from different places all over the mural lined up perfectly, statistically even, and the accretions are all in the right place. So we feel really confident that this date is correct, and this date is 4,700 years ago when this paint was laid down. I put this along a timeline that we're more familiar with in terms of history, right? Because it's really hard to remember, 4,000, after you get past about 600 years, everything feels just super old, right? But this is like right around when the pyramids were going up. This is way before Rome was founded. This is way before the Maya Classic period, way before the Crusades. I mean, this is pretty old. At this site called Jaguar Shelter has a beautiful figure standing up right here with wings out and black crenellated aspect to the top, 5,500 years old. This, in Texas, mural was painted at the same time that writing was being developed in Mesopotamia. We've also learned through our radiocarbon dating that not only are these the oldest, but they were the longest continuous. They used the same rules and the same motifs for over 4,000 years. Our youngest radiocarbon date is 1,400 years ago. It's an extremely long time to continue the same art-making process, and it was a real community sacrifice to come together in these certain ritual times and gather. Think about the size of the murals that you saw. Some smaller, but I mean, that monumental one aside, even the White Shaman is 32 feet across. How much paint you have, you have to have all the mineral pigments for the different colors. You have to kill the animals and harvest the fat and then not eat it. You're a hunter-gatherer. Fat is the staple thing you need the most. But it is more important for you to put that in paint and put your stories on the wall than to put it in the bellies of your children. Water, gathering the water, gathering what they used a sotol or lechuguilla root to make that water and that paint and that fat mix, makes the most beautiful paint ever. And it sucks right into that limestone wall. And it is still today as bright as it was when they painted it. It's just that spalling and accretions getting added to it really can cover it up. This is a 500-year-old Aztec codex. Hundreds of people pore over the 5 remaining Aztec codices that there are in the world. There are whole Mesoamericanist departments in universities. But what we are trying to share with everyone is that we have 5,500-year-old codices here in Texas, and we are the only ones that are preserving and studying them. This is a library, and it really deserves to be preserved. Okay, so of course there's always a little bit of a downside, and the downside here is that these sites, they're not canvases that we can put in climate-controlled places. These are extremely endangered. So you can see, just generally speaking, from regular spalling, the way that the wall will always do. But we also have accretions that grow on it. And you can see the places where there is rock art, which I know you cannot see it here, but there is a beautiful figure here and here. There's even more spalling because the weight of the paint on the wall is actually detrimental in terms of what's going to spall first. So you can sometimes walk up to a rock art site and figure out where the figures are based on where the spalls are. Flash flooding is also a huge problem for us. I know that sounds kind of crazy in an arid environment, and now it used to be a beautiful grassland where those grasses held a lot of water, but it was really grazed heavily in the last 100 and 150 years, and so those grasses are gone, and it's now mostly just arid plants, and so the waters just run every which way. In the late 60s, a decision was made to dam the Rio Grande in this area. Some of you might be familiar with Amistad Reservoir. And they put the dam right at the confluence of the Devil's River and the Rio Grande River and flooded the whole main section of where this rock art was and would have been. So a lot of sites were lost at that time. And it also changed the water dynamics so that those rivers and tributaries running now hit standing water and are silting up the canyons. So sites that were far from the water when they were painted are now being impacted by flooding. Even Panther Cave, as you can see here, in Seminole Canyon State Park. We also have, well, this is an incredible site that we were recently allowed to, and please don't take a picture of this one because we do not have the ability to reproduce this, but I am allowed to share it. It is 2 incredible panthers speaking to one another, and there's panthers coming all the way across the mural here, but you can see a giant spall where the entire back wall came off right there. And then do you see this right here? Someone tried to take a souvenir. Yeah. They surely didn't get away with it because when you try to remove any of the paint, the whole wall just falls apart. It's the way limestone is made. But if you're ever collecting and you see these little feet, please let me know because we would like to have them back. This is my team. This is Shumla. We are the ones that are working to preserve these sites. Thank you. It looks like we're all sunburned, but I think that's the way the light is showing. Yes, so we do this through our 4 pillars. Documentation, we go and take high-resolution 3D models, high-resolution 2D images, because you need to have both. You need to be able to zoom in to the sand grain to see where that paint is laid down, but you also need to know where the paint is laid on the canvas that is the rock wall, because they often used cracks and seeps and all sorts of different ledges and things as part of the composition. We also, of course, do research. This is Karen in her lab with the plasma oxidation system. And stewardship. So most of these sites are privately owned, and we work really closely with the landowners to kind of help them understand what it is that they own. Many of them were raised, with these sites on their property. And I mean, when you're raised in a castle, you don't know that you're in a castle. You just think this is how everybody lives, right? So we're like, no. This is globally unique. What you own, is globally unique, and it is worth preserving. We work with the agencies, too, that are down there. Of course, it's right on the border, so there's a lot of Border Patrol activity, and it's a high turnover. They keep those boys moving around in the Border Patrol, and they don't know. They're coming from Iowa or Michigan or Maine, and they've never seen anything like this. And so, that might put their name on it, or not maliciously, just out of ignorance. So we work to try to educate and also use them as partners. If they're going to be out there in the wilderness looking at these sites, let us know if there's a site that, goats are bedding down in, or, water is starting to impact, or there's a tree growing up against something, that we could talk to a landowner and have that mitigated. Our favorite is when we get to take landowners to the sites that they haven't seen themselves on their properties and show them what they have. And I guess you really can't see. This is such a beautiful site. It has this giant black comb, and it's kind of this shape, and it has these black combs that come up from it. And then this is the biggest power bundle we've ever seen. It's the size of that light. It feels like it's so unusual, such an incredible and unique site. And we got to take not only this generation that owns it, but their children, and help to excite the next generations as well, and partnering with us and mitigating any impacts to these sites. We also do a lot of education, things like what I'm doing today, just trying to get the word out and share this incredible resource. We've been around now for 28 years, and for the first, I'd say 15 to 20 years, we really couldn't say too much to the general public about what we were finding, because at that time the landowners were still really nervous that if we shone too big a light on this, the government would want to take it, or something would happen that they didn't want. But now, many of you may be from West Texas. When it takes a long time to become a community member in West Texas. Memories are also long and families are long, but we have now become a member of their community and are trusted, and we want to work with them to do the mitigation on their property, and we want them to have conservation easements and really think about the longevity of these sites. So we work really closely with them. But now we can do things like this, where we can work with the Whitty Museum here, for example. So we do internships where we have archaeological internships, curatorial internships. You can imagine we produce a great amount of data. And our data is truly, the archaeological, being out there in the field and taking these pictures is sort of the mining. The gold is our data. That is what future researchers will be able to study and to look at when these sites are gone. So we have curatorial interns, archaeological interns, and chemistry interns. And this is one of our chemistry interns. We also have field schools through Texas State University, and this here in the center is our founder, Carolyn Boyd. She now has an endowed professorship at Texas State University, where she is starting to teach the work that she's doing and the interpretive work, especially in partnership with the indigenous peoples. And then here, museum partnerships. Doing things like putting rock shelters on the walls for people who can't go into rural West Texas and hike into a canyon, but would really like to experience this art. And these are the kinds of things, we were just, I think this month, we were in the American Archaeology magazine, and being in National Geographic, being out there more in the public, so that we can hopefully raise more money to preserve these sites. We also have an exhibit partnership with the Houston Museum of Natural Science, where they have a replica of a shelter using our 3D models. So, if you would like to help us and to contribute to the preservation of this work, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I am going to take some questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions, but I know we only have about 10 minutes before the next presenter. This QR code will go straight to a donation page if you are so moved, and I would be happy to take some questions. And if you want to see the funny thing I want to show you about Jackrabbit Shelter, I will do that in a second. Yes, sir.
Have y'all identified or explored any complementary sites like the other side of the Rio Grande? It seems so focused on that. I know the geography on the other side is different.
Yes. We have not been able to go and conduct true archaeological projects there. We have been told we may come back with our lives, but we would not come back with our equipment. And so we are working to build relationships right now. We have kind of a 5-year plan for that. We're trying to build the relationships right now that we need. We also have permitting, it's a totally different country. And the way permitting works, and the landowners on that side of the border do not want to work with the government. But if we're not working with the government with the right permits, then we are doing something illegal. So there's a lot of relationship building that needs to be done for us to be able to go there. But that is our ultimate goal. I mean, this job will not be complete until that's done.
Any communication relationships with the archaeologists independent of the Mexican government?
We're starting to, yeah. Though the archaeologists there are government archaeologists, yeah.
It's a rich country, and there's countless sites for them to work. They just
For sure.
involved in so much. You need to turn the page and look at the others.
Without question. Without question, yes. Yes.
Just a little bit more about the application process.
Yeah.
The colors, the layering, the binder. I'm curious if it's a painterly technique. Did you locate any tools or evidence of the reservoirs?
Yes.
Or is it a blow dart technique like you see in Europe, et cetera?
Perfect. So, such a good question. All of the above. So we don't find a lot of paint pots because that paint, when they make that paint is super sacred. And they would probably have put it in shells to use, and then they would then burn that. The same with, to create murals like this, you would have to have a sketch to begin with of some kind. And whether that was drawn on the ground in dust and things like that, which is probably unlikely, more likely on a skin, but then that would have also been destroyed because of its sacred aspects. We know that they were unbelievably skilled artists, and for one, we never find a smudge. So we know that they painted all the black, and then they walked away, and they let that, just like an artist does now, right? They let it perfectly dry. Because when they put that red line on top, we never see a place where that black moves. We know that they use techniques where they would hold something up and use a straight edge, or they would cover up when they were going to do something blow dart-like, they would cover up a certain section so that those spatters are in a completely very specific place. They do a lot of negative space stuff. So we will find panthers that are entirely painted of etch marks, or not scratch marks, what is this? Hash marks, thank you. Hash marks, and if you follow the hash marks, you find the 4 legs and the head and the tail going up over the body. We think that there were probably masters. There were people amongst their culture who got good at this, who probably showed some ability in it, some interest in it, and became the ones that did the true artwork. but everybody was involved. They had to return to sites like these alignment sites. You'd have to go on a summer solstice and you'd have to make a mark, and you can't do it like right then when it's happening, You make some marks, you figure out where things are, you figure out what the composition is you're creating, and then in a year or 2 years, you come back and do that composition. So it was a really long period of creating the idea of what was going to be made, and then a pretty short amount of time to actually do the work, with probably ritual in between every layer and drying time. Yeah, yes. Uh-huh.
Do you see those preparation marks when you look at the site?
Almost never. Very rarely we'll find a very light pink line, but they were expert at covering it up. And when we talked to the Huichol, they have shared, and the reason, in fact, this is part of my presentation that I forgot to say, the reason I call it living art, because they say that when they put these on the wall, when they give these power, when they give them agency, they become alive. This art is alive. And after asking how in the world we have these images, they asked who's taking care of them, because they require to be fed, they require to be to have ceremony in these places to keep them alive. And their life is a part of all of our lives and the cycle of the way that it goes. So we've been taught kind of the proper way that we should even interact with this art, which is when we go into a site, we ask for permission. We would like to come, we would like to learn from you. May we come? And it's kind of like if I walked into your house and I just started taking pictures of your stuff, Like, it's an obvious sign of respect that never occurred to us, from our view to do, but now we do. We also sometimes leave small offerings that are okay with the ecologists, but also things that the Mara'aka may have said that, would be appropriate. Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh.
Do you find evidence that in the care and maintenance of the murals 1,000, 2,000 years ago, do you find evidence that they were retouched or repainted?
Ooh, that's a great question, and no, never. In fact, they would actually destroy them. We call it post-painting modification. So they would often come and take portions, little bits off, and we believe that was used in medicine. And so we will find, I'm trying to think if I have a picture here, places where there'll be a beautiful panther painted all in red, and then most of its body is gone from post-painting modification.
My second question is, would you please explain the difference between a petroglyph and a pictograph?
Yeah.
Are you pictographs in the picture?
Absolutely. So petroglyph is anything etched into rock. Pictograph is anything painted on rock. So almost everything in the Lower Pecos is pictographs. We do have some petroglyphs, and in some of the sites, the petroglyphs are images that look like direction markers, because I shouldn't say all about anything, but most of these sites are very specific in the way that they face. So for example, the Fate Bell mural, which was the one that I kept showing you with the head and the wings, faces due east and is awash with light in the summer solstice. It's perfectly due east. And the White Shaman mural is instead perfectly due west. So does that answer your question?
Jessica, you may have mentioned this, but what plants were used to create the colors?
Oh, yeah. So all of the pigments were mineral pigments. So they didn't even use charcoal ever. In Pecos River style art, I should say. In historic art, there are charcoal crayons used. They used iron oxides. They used manganese for black, iron oxides for red and yellow, and huolite for white. And the huolite has disappeared quite a lot. There was a lot more white on these murals than we can see now. But one of the really cool things we know is that they sometimes would take yellow iron oxide and then burn it to make it red, because that infused the pigment with flame, which is one of the things that the red signifies. And so rather than just taking a red iron oxide, which would be far easier, they would start with a yellow, burn it to make it imbued with the power of flame, and then use that as the red pigment. Yeah. Yes? Yes?
If it takes a short amount of time to make them finally, are you thinking these were made by a single artist from a single generation or a single group of artists for a wall from a single generation?
Yeah. So the murals were painted, so like White Shaman, for example, that 32-foot wide mural would have been painted probably in a week, depending on drying time, but it's pretty arid out there. So not very long to do the actual work. And you can see why it would be, because, and another reason, it's ritually important that it be black, red, yellow, white. This is the process, as the Huichol have shared, the process of creation. Black is the primordial, when the sun is all the way, gone. The red is right before the sun rises. When that red starts on the horizon, the yellow is right after the sun has crossed that horizon, bright yellow, and then the white is the noonday sun. And then it kind of goes backwards into the cycle. But also, if you are going to create a mural like this, it absolutely makes no sense to make all of your paint pots with that much paint, but then only paint your black while your red and yellow and white dry. Then you're gonna have to go get more fat and go get more water and go get more. So there's always that ritual and that practical aspect to the way that these things were done. Yeah. Yeah.
Did they, before Amistad was impounded, did they take any pictures? Is there any historical record?
They did a salvage archaeology project, but they only did excavation archaeology. At that time, the archaeologists thought that we would never know what these murals meant and that the people who painted them were gone. And not because they, again, were malicious, they just didn't know, so they were in a hurry. That, dam was going up, and so they really didn't. In some of the text site forms, it'll say, and there was rock art, but that's about it, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.